She said it at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in March. And she said it the way she said things she believed completely, without hesitation, without softening, without the small pause that sometimes precedes a cruelty that the speaker at least partially recognizes as cruel. She just said it, flat and certain, and aimed directly at the thing I had been building the courage to say for 6 months, the thing I had carried through 6 months of research and planning, and the specific private terror of a woman who has decided to do something large and irreversible and has not yet told her family because telling her family means surviving what they say about it. I told my mother Pamela I was moving to Amsterdam. I told her I had accepted a position with a tech company headquartered in the Netherlands, that the salary was nearly double what I was earning at home, that I had researched the city and the culture and the practicalities of the move with the thoroughness I brought to everything I decided to do, that I had a start date in 8 weeks and an apartment lead and a language learning program already running on my phone. She looked at me. She said, "You'll fail miserably." Not maybe. Not I'm worried about you. Not this seems fast. Have you thought it through? She looked at her 27-year-old daughter across the kitchen table she had raised me at, and she said I would fail miserably with the flat certainty of someone delivering a weather forecast for a storm they had already decided was coming. Then she said, "You don't speak the language. You don't know anyone there. You've never lived outside this city. What makes you think a country full of strangers is going to want you when you can barely manage things here?" Barely manage things here. I want to sit with that phrase for a moment because it is doing a lot of work in one sentence. And the work it is doing is the work Pamela had been doing on me for 27 years, the slow, patient, drip-by-drip erosion of a daughter's belief in her own capability, done not with malice in the conventional sense, but with the specific conviction of a woman who had decided very early what I was and was capable of, and who had never once updated that decision regardless of what I showed her. What I had shown her by 27 was this. I had graduated with a degree in computer science, which Pamela had called overly ambitious when I declared it at 19. I had taught myself 2 additional programming languages in the evenings after my first job, which Pamela had called unnecessary when she found out. I had been promoted twice in 3 years at the company I had joined after graduation, which Pamela had acknowledged briefly, and then redirected into a conversation about Jason, my brother, and whatever Jason was doing that month that required her attention and her enthusiasm and the particular brightness she reserved for him. I had been headhunted by the Dutch company after a conference presentation I had given on a system architecture solution I had developed independently, which Pamela did not know about because I had stopped telling Pamela professional things that I did not want processed through her filter of what I was and wasn't capable of. And I had learned Dutch. Not fluently, not yet, not by March. But I had been learning it for 8 months in secret, quietly, on the same phone where Pamela saw me sometimes sitting and assumed I was scrolling mindlessly in the specific privacy of a plan being built by someone who had learned that plans shared too early in this family became plans subject to demolition. 8 months of Dutch, every day, in 15 and 30-minute increments on my commute and my lunch break and the hour before I fell asleep. And by March, I could hold a basic conversation and read a menu and understand approximately 60% of a spoken sentence if the speaker was patient. You don't speak the language. I did not tell her I spoke the language. I let her say what she said, and I sat with it the way I had sat with things Pamela said my whole life, not swallowing it exactly, but filing it, adding it to the record, the long and detailed record of a mother's certainty about a daughter she had fundamentally and persistently misread. Richard, my father, was in the other room. He did not come in. Richard had a long history of not coming into rooms where Pamela was saying things, which was his method of preserving his own peace at the cost of mine. and I had made my peace with Richard's absences the way you make peace with weather. Not because it was right, but because it was consistent and reliable, and at least I could plan around it. Jason, who was 24 and who was living at home, and who was, as far as anyone could tell, in the early stages of a plan to continue living at home indefinitely. Jason was somewhere in the house too. He appeared briefly in the kitchen doorway during Pamela's forecast, long enough to hear the word Amsterdam. And he looked at me with the expression he used when he was evaluating whether a situation was going to be entertaining or awkward, and had determined it was going to be both. And then he disappeared. I said, "I've accepted the offer, Mom. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you because you're my mother, and I thought you deserved to know." She said, "You'll be back in 6 months with your tail between your legs, and I'll still be here." I said, "Okay." I got up from the table. I drove to Denise's apartment, which was where I went when I needed to be somewhere that my reality was understood by the person in the room with me. Denise had known me since we were 14, and she had the specific gift of a person who has watched you grow from the inside of your life rather than the outside, who knows not just what you've done but how much it cost you to do it, and what you were working against when you did it. She opened the door and looked at my face and said, "How bad?" I said, "She told me I'd fail miserably." Denise said, without missing a beat, "She said the same thing when you changed your major." "I know." "And when you presented at the conference." "I know." "And when you got the second promotion." "Denise, I'm just noting the pattern." She said, "Come in. I have wine, and I need you to tell me everything about Amsterdam." I went to Amsterdam 8 weeks later. I want to tell you about leaving because the leaving matters, not just what came after, but the act itself, the specific morning of it, the car to the airport with a suitcase I had packed with the careful precision of someone who has thought very hard about what they are bringing and what they are leaving behind. Richard drove me. He was quiet in the way he was quiet when he was feeling something he didn't have the tools to express. And when he dropped me at departures, he held on to the hug slightly longer than usual, and he said, into the top of my head, "You'll be great." 2 words from a man who had not come into the kitchen. I took them anyway. I took them because they were real and because Richard in his limited way meant them, and because I was about to get on a plane to a country where I knew nobody, and I needed every true thing I could carry. Pamela had not come to the airport. She had said goodbye the evening before, briefly in the hallway, with the specific quality of a woman who was managing the gap between what she felt and what she had said, and had not yet figured out how to bridge it. She said, "Be careful," and I said I would, and she said nothing else, and I drove to Denise's for the last night, and we sat up until 2 in the morning talking about everything and nothing, and the terrifying, beautiful enormity of what was beginning. The first year in Amsterdam was the hardest year of my life. I want to say that plainly because the version of this story that is only triumph is not the true version, and the true version is the only one worth telling. The first year was hard in the specific, isolating way of building a life in a new country from scratch. The language gap, which was real despite my 8 months of preparation, because there is a difference between understanding 60% of a patient speaker and navigating the full speed of a working environment in a language that is not yours. The social gap, which is the slower and lonelier kind, the gap between being in a place and belonging to it, which takes time, more time than you think you need, and the in-between period has a texture that is difficult to describe to people who have not felt it, but that I would call something like sustained, low-grade disorientation punctuated by moments of extraordinary beauty. The work was not hard. The work was the thing that saved me, the thing I was good at, the thing I had been headhunted for, the thing I understood, and that understood me back in the universal language of a system that either works or it doesn't, and I made it work. My team was Dutch and British and Indian and Nigerian, and the common language of our work was the work itself. And in the work, I was not the woman who had moved to a country where she knew nobody and was learning to order coffee with full confidence. In the work, I was exactly who I had always been, which was good, which was precise, which was the person whose conference presentation had made someone reach out and offer her a different future. I called Pamela on Sundays. Not every Sunday, often enough. Short calls, factual. The surface of a life offered to a woman who had not given me reason to offer her the depth of it. She asked how the weather was. She told me what Jason was doing. She said once in month 4, in the voice she used when she was touching something she didn't know how to approach, "It sounds like you're managing." Managing, not thriving, not building something. Managing, as if the best available outcome for my Amsterdam life was adequacy. I said, "Yes, Mom, I'm managing." And I let the word be what she meant it to be, which was a small thing, and I kept the rest of it, the reality of what I was building, the first fluent Dutch conversation I had had without switching to English at any point, the project lead role I had been given in month 7, the raise that came with it. The Sunday mornings I had started spending at a market near my apartment where I knew the vendor who sold the good bread and the woman with the tulips who always gave me an extra stem. Because she said I looked like someone who appreciated them, I kept all of that in the part of my life that Pamela had not earned access to. The company grew. This is the part that requires some context, so I will give it. The company I had joined was a technology firm in the specific growth stage, where things accelerate if you have the right people and the right product and the right timing. We had all three. What we did, specifically, was software infrastructure for mid-sized companies expanding internationally, which was, looking back, almost too perfectly suited to my own life. The work of building the technical structures that let businesses cross borders, done by a woman who had crossed one herself and understood what that cost and what it produced. I was good at it. I was, by year 2, being described internally as one of the architects of the company's expansion methodology. I had built systems that were being replicated across the company's client base, and I had a professional reputation that I had not carried with me from home, but had built from the ground up in a city where nobody had known my name when I arrived. Michael, the CEO, had a saying that he used at company meetings when he was describing the kind of work he wanted the company to do. He said, "Build it like it's permanent. Even before you know, it will be." I had been building things like they were permanent since I was 27 years old, standing in a kitchen being told I would fail miserably. In year 3, the company began planning its expansion into additional European markets. This is the part 1 I'm going to tell you slowly because it deserves to be told slowly. The company had been operating from Amsterdam and serving clients across Europe, but doing it without a physical presence in the secondary markets, without offices in the cities where the client density was beginning to justify them. The board had been discussing this for several months, and Michael had been building the business case and the timeline and the staffing model, and I had been involved in the technical planning for all of it, had in fact written significant portions of the infrastructure proposal that the board had approved in October. What I had not been involved in was the communications strategy. So when Michael called me into a meeting on a Tuesday morning in November and told me what he was about to announce and how he was about to announce it, I was not expecting it. He said the company was opening its first office outside of Amsterdam. He said the city was London. He said he wanted me to lead it, not manage the technical rollout. Lead the office, director of the London operation, building the team from initial hire, establishing the company's presence in the UK market, and doing it with the specific combination of technical competence and expansion experience that I had been accumulating for 3 years. I sat across from Michael in his glass-walled office, and I looked at him, and I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Crystal, you wrote the framework this expansion is built on. Who else would I ask?" The announcement went out the following week. Press release, industry publications, LinkedIn posts from Michael and from the company's communications team. My name attached to the London director role. The company's first European expansion outside its founding city, with the technical architecture it was built on credited in the release to the work my team had done. I sent my mother the press release link on a Thursday evening. I did not call. I did not build to it. I sent the link in a text message with no preamble, the way you send someone information you want them to have without the conversation that would complicate the having of it. She read it. I know she read it because the message went from delivered to read within 4 minutes, and then there was a silence that lasted 3 hours, which was a longer silence than Pamela had maintained in any communication with me in 3 years of Amsterdam Sundays. Then she called. Her voice had the quality I had never heard from her before Amsterdam and had not heard in 3 years of calls. Not the managing voice, not the bright about Jason voice, not the forecasting voice that had told me I would fail miserably. Something underneath, all of those. Something that had been sitting beneath the architecture of the mother she had performed for 27 years, and that was coming up now through a crack in the performance. She said, "London." "Yes," I said. "You're running their London office." "Director," I said. "Yes." A silence. Then she said, "I want to come see you." Not congratulations. Not I was wrong. Not the full accounting of the kitchen table and the forecast and the fail miserably and the 3 years of Sunday calls where she had offered me weather updates and Jason's activities while I was across an ocean building something she had told me I couldn't build. Just, "I want to come see you." I understood what it was. It was the beginning of a sentence that did not yet have the rest of its words. It was a woman standing at the edge of something she had created with her certainty and looking across it at her daughter on the other side and reaching, in the only way she currently knew how, toward the crossing. I let her stand there for a moment. I thought about the kitchen table. I thought about Denise saying she said the same thing when you changed your major and counting the pattern without blinking. I thought about Richard's hug at the airport, and "you'll be great" into the top of my head. I thought about the tulip woman at the Sunday market, who always gave me an extra stem. I thought about Michael saying, "Who else would I ask?" I thought about 3 years of building something in a city where I had arrived knowing nobody, in a language I had been told I didn't speak, in a life I had been told would fail miserably. And I thought about what those 3 years had produced, which was a director's role in a company I was proud of and a fluency I had earned word by word, and a life that was genuinely mine in a way my life had never quite been when it was lived in the shadow of Pamela's certainty about what I was. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I can come," she said. "Yes," I said. "You can come." She came in February. I will not pretend the visit was uncomplicated, because it was not. There is no version of 3 years of absence and a kitchen table conversation and a press release and a phone call where the meeting on the other side is simple. Pamela came off the plane with the expression of a woman who had been preparing herself for something and was not yet sure if the preparation had been adequate. I took her to the apartment first. She stood in the middle of it and turned around slowly, taking in the specific life I had assembled, the bookshelf with Dutch and English titles arranged, not by language, but by subject, the print on the wall I had found at a market in my second year that had something to do with how I understood the city now the small kitchen where I cooked the things I had learned to cook here, the window that looked out over the canal, that was doing what canals in Amsterdam did in February, which was gray and cold and still somehow beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when you have looked at them long enough to love them. She said, "It's really yours." "Yes," I said, "it is." She looked at the window. "I thought," she stopped. "I know what you thought," I said, not cruelly, factually. "I was wrong," she said. 3 words. The full sentence this time. Unlike Ronald's, I should have done right by it. Unlike the partial things partial people offer when they are not quite ready for the complete version. Pamela said it completely. I was wrong. In the middle of my apartment, looking at my canal, holding her coat because she had not yet sat down. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had told me I would fail miserably, and who had spent 3 years on the other side of a phone call offering me weather updates instead of questions about my life, and who was standing in the middle of the thing I had built while she was doing that, and saying she had been wrong. I said, "Sit down, Mom. I'll make tea." She sat. I made tea. We sat at my table, not hers, in my city, with the canal outside the window, and we talked, really talked, in the way we had not talked at her kitchen table in March 4 years earlier, in the way we had not talked on the Sunday calls, in the way that requires both people to be willing to be seen rather than just heard. She asked about the work. I told her. More than I had told her in 4 years combined, the real version, the technical architecture, and the expansion methodology, and what it had felt like to build something in a language and a culture that were not mine, and to have it recognized by people who had no reason to believe in me except the work itself. She listened. She asked questions. Some of them were good questions. Some of them revealed the limits of what she understood about what I did, but the asking was genuine, and the limits were not contempt. They were just the gap between a woman who had made up her mind about her daughter at 27, and the daughter who had spent the years since then becoming someone that mind had not accounted for. She cried once, briefly, when I told her about the first year, about the loneliness of it, about the sustained low-grade disorientation, punctuated by moments of extraordinary beauty. I told her about the tulip woman who gave me an extra stem, and she cried. And she said, "I didn't know," and I said, "I know you didn't," and I meant both things. I knew she didn't know because I hadn't told her, and I hadn't told her because she hadn't made it safe to, and that was a circle we were both going to have to sit with for a while before it resolved into something else. She left after 5 days, at the airport, in the specific reversed symmetry of a goodbye that mirrored the one 3 years ago when Richard had held on slightly too long and she had not come. She held on slightly too long. She said, "Come home for Christmas." I thought about it. "I'll be in London for the office opening in November." I said, "Maybe after that." "London," she said, hearing it again. Director. I confirmed. She looked at me the way she had looked at my apartment, with the slow, real recognition of a woman encountering something that does not fit the map she has been using, and is being asked at this late stage to draw a new one. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that, because triumph would require me to have wanted her suffering, and I had never wanted that. I had wanted her accuracy, her genuine engagement with who I was rather than the story she had decided to tell about me. And what I felt in that airport was not triumph, but something quieter and more durable. Relief. The specific relief of a woman who spent 3 years building something in the full presence of her own doubt and her mother's certainty and the daily terrifying work of becoming, who built it anyway and finished and looked at it and found it standing. I flew back to Amsterdam. I walked through my city in the February afternoon with the specific ease of someone who knows where they are. Not just the streets, though I knew the streets, knew them the way you know something when you have walked it in every weather and every mood and every version of yourself that the years produce. I knew where I was in the larger sense, the sense that matters. I bought tulips from the woman at the market. She gave me an extra stem. I brought them home and put them in the window where the canal light hit them in the late afternoon, and I sat at my table, and I thought about a kitchen table in March 4 years ago, and a word that was not a question and was not an invitation, and was not the beginning of a story worth telling. You'll fail miserably. I thought about it the way you think about the thing that lit the fire, not with gratitude. Not quite, because she should not have said it, and the saying of it was a wrong thing done to a daughter who deserved better. But with the specific knowledge of a woman who knows what she ran on for 4 years, who knows that some fuel is ugly in its origins and pure in what it produces, who knows that the miserably was wrong, and the failing was wrong, and the certainty was wrong, and the kitchen table was the beginning of something Pamela had not intended to begin. The London office, my name on the announcement, the apartment with the canal view, the tulips in the window, the extra stem, all of it begun at a kitchen table where a woman told her daughter what she could not do. All of it built in the exact direction of that impossible. All of it mine. Every single extraordinary, miserable, beautiful, permanent piece of it. Mine.